Good morning, Lucien.
It was not a surprise when the reappearance of Lucien, or Ares, in the Black Swan boardroom caused a commotion. He greeted Helios with a slight nod and naturally sat down at his usual seat, as if he had never left.
I'll reopen the lab later. Some research data is only kept there after all.
Feel free. I don't know much about the situation in the R&D department. It shouldn't have changed much since you left.
The rest of the room had no intention of exchanging pleasantries. Suspicion, and even hostility, roamed about in the shadows.
How can we let that traitor sit at this table again?
He's completely beyond our control. Too dangerous.
Let us begin.
The complaints didn't seem to reach Helios. He took a seat at the head of the table and signaled for the meeting to begin.
Helios, before the meeting starts, aren't you going to explain why Ares...
Lucien shot a glance at the person speaking. A sudden silence fell over the room. At last, the man who spoke sat down reluctantly, and the murmurs faded. Lucien paid no attention to the skeptical glances cast his way and allowed them to speculate. From the very beginning, he knew Black Swan was bound to declare war on the Special Task Force and become their main target, which was the reason he and Helios had met a few times and resolved to cooperate. Someone needed to take the villain role in order to allow the light to burst through the dark, and someone needed to become the savior to expel the darkness in the light. The reconstruction of Ultima Bio Research was bound to succeed. Its long-accumulated reputation had served its purpose, surmounting every obstacle most effectively. With the plan now successfully in place, it was time for his official return. Direct communication was more convenient than passing encrypted information, especially when it came to this topic about the future. Lucien never lost sight of his goal. Black Swan, Ultima Bio Research, and even the things beyond were all but one piece of the puzzle. When looking at the big picture, many lucrative benefits and high-standing positions became insignificant compared to the ultimate goal. He built the blocks piece by piece, then arranged them into a complete blueprint. His initial assumptions were reinforced by what he previously saw in the Black Cabin. Time stops for no one. The meeting soon got on track, and the discussions about meaningful topics finally began. As usual, Lucien listened quietly without speaking much. Everything was as planned. The only thing left was execution. The rain fell endlessly from a thick layer of clouds covering the sky and seemingly forever obscuring the sunshine. Lucien deftly picked out the files in the Black Swan archive room. The tall stacked bookshelves formed a growing forest of information under the dim artificial light, yielding the fruit of the tree of knowledge from the Garden of Eden. This database was undoubtedly an advantage exclusive to Black Swan's R&D department. He had spent countless days and nights in this place, having made a substantial contribution to the expansion of information, even to the extent that he knew every file inside and out. As he passed by the file cabinet that contained the data from a particular experiment, his gaze briefly rested on an old document. Lucien remembered everything that happened in the old orphanage building and the fragile girl on the operating table. That was when the girl brought color into his world. The brief encounter sowed the bright rainbow seeds, which grew in the neglected corners into vines and flowers. Lucien chuckled softly, not noticing that his eyes were filled with tenderness, like a slow-spreading ripple in a puddle of spring water. It was not until his phone vibrated that his expression returned to normal.
Professor Lucien, this is Pete. The theoretical derivation and modeling of the stage are now complete.
Understood.
This good news was not a surprise, but it was slightly earlier than he had anticipated.
Do we begin the experiment now?
I'll confirm some data. We should be able to start this Wednesday. Make an appointment for lab number 3 and notify the researchers we've worked with before.
Got it. Also, the production team of Miracle Finder sent you a thank you note for your help with their shows, and she brought you some homemade cookies. I've put them in your drawer.
Great, thank you.
His phone vibrated again as soon as the call ended. A new message appeared on the screen. Lucien stopped to reply to the girl's message, telling her the gift was well received. He then sent her a photo taken that morning of the new plant growing on the office balcony. He was not sure when this habit started. It simply seeped into his life in the most subtle way. For 10 minutes or so, he did nothing but lean against the bookshelf, replying to the girl's texts about interesting things that happened in her life. He was like a traveler who finally lit a campfire to take a rest in the long night. While waiting for her reply, his gaze landed on the darkened glass window. Every passerby outside the window lived in their own small world, with their own limited perception, without caring about their origin and knowing nothing of their next destination. But then again, each one of them lived with enthusiasm for tomorrow. At that moment, the girl sent him a new message that said that she missed him. Lucien sensed the changes in his body, which he thought was caused by Evol. There weren't any anomalies in the initial examination, but he felt it had something to do with the girl. There were many gaps in the research data concerning Evol. If given a chance, he would use himself as a case study, but there were more urgent matters to be resolved right now. He walked down the road leading to Ultima Bioresearch. The sky was gloomy overhead, and it looked as though it would rain at any time. The humid low-pressure air was like an ominous omen, waiting maliciously in the shadows. As if in response to the depressing weather, the earth began to shake without warning. Though the earthquake was mild and brief, it sent a wave of panic through the crowds. There were even rumors being spread about doomsday. Commotions were quickly stirred up in the streets that were already gripped by fear. Lucien didn't stay long and continued towards his destination. The increased frequency of extreme weather and natural disasters meant he needed to speed up his actions. Lucien hadn't walked far when another wave of aftershocks struck. There were loud thuds of heavy objects falling off to the side, and the sound of steel bars collapsing mixed with the painful screams of agony and shock. Lucien looked over to find the toppled construction materials outside an alley. It appeared that people had been injured. She would run over without hesitation if she were here. For some reason, this was the first thought that came to Lucien's mind. He could almost see the thin girl running against the crowd to offer help to others in any way she could. He laughed somewhat self-deprecatingly as he called an ambulance while pushing past the fleeing crowd and heading toward the accident.
Are you all right?
Lucien crouched down, trying to get a visual of the situation through the cracks between the building materials.
I'm fine, but I think I got injured. Oh, my leg hurts. My kid is...
Trapped inside was a mother in her 30s or 40s, her voice trembling, and holding a screaming child tight in her arms.
Don't panic. I've called an ambulance.
Lucien softened his voice to reassure them.
The medics will be here soon.
A glow rose in the air as he spoke, like a firefly floating leisurely. He was taken by surprise for a brief moment, but quickly realized what it was. The child suddenly stopped crying. His eyes widened curiously, giggling as he reached out to catch the floating light. Despite failing to notice her surroundings, the mother gradually calmed down and wiped the tears from her child's face. She then sighed with relief and said to Lucien,
Thank you. I seem to have calmed down now.
Lucien smiled and nodded, then stood up to leave.
Are you Professor Lucien?
She examined Lucien and suddenly remembered where she had seen this familiar face.
Yes, I am.
Thank you for everything you've done. I never thought I'd meet you in this situation.
The mother's eyes began to well up.
Our family almost died during the flu outbreak. If it wasn't for you and Ultima Bioresearch.
Lucien smiled.
It It was our job as researchers. You're giving us too much credit.
The woman shook her head and said with sincere gratitude,
People like you are the hope for this world.
The ambulance siren sounded from a distance, and others gradually came over to offer their help. Lucien politely explained the situation and quietly left the scene.
Is that what you would want me to do?
Lucien whispered a question to himself and to the girl who wasn't with him at the moment. To him, the woman's praise was an overstatement. He wasn't a saint. The path he chose was full of decisions and sacrifices. It was the girl who taught him kindness and warmth. It was she who walked beside him time and time again, showing him the beauty of the world that he had never noticed. She was the true light that shone in the darkness, the only person who could.
Professor Lucien, here's the data.
Pete knocked on the lab door.
Thank you.
Lucien's gaze remained fixated on the equipment before him as he continued to record data.
Is it going well? The theories and concepts of this experiment are outside my expertise. I can't be of much help.
Yes, it's going better than expected.
Lucien took the data and compared it with his own records.
The equipment operation has stabilized, with only a few extreme exceptions outside the theoretical values. We can begin preparations for optimization.
Great.
Let's begin a new round of tests in 20 minutes.
Lucien's emotionless voice echoed in the empty lab. Pete nodded and continued with his work. Interestingly enough, the girl seemed to have an extraordinary significance in Lucien's extensive research. Evolution was too broad of a variable, and within the limited information left by previous generations, much of it was written with prejudice. For a long time, he had studied alone in the boundless darkness, until the girl finally appeared and filled in the last gaps in his research. Lucien never believed in such things as genius or inspiration. The only miracle was the girl's genes and her very existence. It was no exaggeration to say that she was the only correct answer among all the fallacies. He held the key to the future at the top of the endless spiral staircase. After days and nights of explorations, he finally found a way to save her from being devoured. Although the goal was now different, this experiment started because of her. Lucien confirmed the data and model again, then gestured to Pete.
Prepare to start a new round of tests, and be sure to keep good records.
Pete nodded and entered the experimental code in the keyboard. In the experimental data record counted in thousands, a blank column was quickly created. Lucien started up the equipment. With a slight buzz, an indescribable distortion began to ripple away from the machine. The space became blurred and abstract, softening and reshaping the lines within view. The light seemed to become smudged, refracting rays in the room lit only by incandescent lights. After a few minutes, the light began to flicker, and the distortion became more intense. Lucien calmly adjusted a few things on the equipment to stabilize the light.
How is it?
It seems a lot more stable this time.
In front of the computer, Pete confirmed the changes of the model on the screen. Lucien looked thoughtfully at the values on the measuring equipment and added a few more lines to the densely filled notebook, nodding slightly.
This adjustment is effective. Mark it out and start the next test in 15 minutes.
He glanced at the calendar. The success of an experiment was merely the first step. He was in a race against time, in search of the way forward for the girl, who carried too much on her shoulders, so that she could walk the path to victory after all dead ends had been ruled out. The hour hand on the lab wall had passed 4 a.m. Lucien finished writing the last line of data, took off his glasses, and gently rubbed his brow to relieve the fatigue from the all-nighter. The tea on the desk had become cold. Lucien couldn't help thinking that she would have made him a new cup of tea if she were here. He could almost see the girl pretending to be upset, urging him to rest while sitting by his side. quietly keeping him company. His gaze fell on the cutely wrapped cookies on the desk. Lucien smiled softly. His fairy caretaker had come here again at some point. Lucien took a sip of the remaining tea, then immersed himself in the experiment once again. Analyze, write, record, execute, then analyze again. Lucien repeated each step methodically. When the morning sun cast a glaring light through the window before him, he finally stretched his shoulders and neck and got up to leave. He could have rested in his office if it counted as rest, but at some point, he had developed a habit of returning to the apartment next door to where the girl lived, and defined this behavior cognitively as going home. The early morning air was slightly humid. Many restaurants had already started serving breakfast. The girl recommended a few of them, places they had been together. Each time, the girl would smile and share her food with him, then stare at him with those bright eyes, asking if he thought it tasted good. Lucien walked into the neighborhood and spotted the light from the girl's apartment from a far distance. She should be making breakfast at this hour. He paused and stared quietly at that light for a few seconds. Something that couldn't be measured with data flowed in his blood with each heartbeat, warming his body. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Carl Jung proposed the persona theory. Essentially, Lucien's separate identities were nothing more than coping strategies for various situations, switching between different personas. Each persona was him, yet they were also just a part of him. Based on this theory, what he revealed in front of the girl was merely one of these personas. But what he couldn't deny was that this was the most core and valuable persona, the one that made Lucien a coherent individual. It reminded him of the warmth of home when he walked alone in the long night. It reminded him not to be disconnected from emotions as he explored the vast abyss. But the girl meant far more to him than that. Whether it was to Ares, Professor Lucien, Miracle Finder's consultant, or any other personas with or without names, her role and significance could never be replaced. Countless coincidences and destiny had firmly embedded this girl into Lucien's each and every persona. Her mark would not fade, no matter which identity he switched to. As Lucien passed by the door of the girl's apartment, there was a brief moment of anticipation, hoping that she would open the door and say, "Good morning, Lucien." When his key was inserted into the lock, there was a small click, followed by the sound of a door handle turning.
Oh, are you just now coming home?
The girl poked her head out of the door. It looked like she was about to leave for work. Seeing Lucien, a gentle and dazzling smile spread across her face.
Good morning, Lucien.